Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. Welcome to the Sip and Saga Society, where we cover histories, mysteries, and just stories worth telling. My name is Karina, and I am your host. And we have all our friends again. Yay! Randy, Christina, Greg, and the snowstorm of the year so far, looming over everybody's heads. I hope everybody is safe, warm, has the bread and the milk. And if you didn't, good luck getting some. Yay!
So rude.
Randy.
Gluten-free, dairy-free.
I forgot about that. Every time I eat a piece of bread, I think about you.
That's cruel, actually.
I think about you and I think about us being like, we shouldn't be eating this.
That's true. I will suffer if it's worth it.
Today, we're going to be talking about the year 1639. What happened? I don't know, but we're going to find out together. But before we get to that, we're going to have to ask the question of the day. What are you sipping? Greg, I want to know, what crazy can does Greg have with him today?
Surprisingly, I don't have a super crazy can.
Oh,
It's unfortunately, but I'm supporting Little Rock, so it's the Lost 40 Brewery, Rooster Illusion, which is a hazy imperial IPA. I tend to prefer beers that are like 8% and up, so it's 9, so it's within the criteria. And I have San Pellegrino,
oh,
blood orange.
classy, classy
Yeah.
Greg.
They're still aesthetic, I
Yeah,
would
that is
say.
very aesthetic.
Yeah, yeah.
And also Lost 40 like brings me home. You know what I mean? I'm like,
I
I
Right?
was
haven't heard
just
that.
about to say,
I
I
haven't
think
heard
that
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 name in
was where
years.
you and I first met, Karina, was at Lost 40. I think
I
that was
think
the
that
first time.
it's a long I met Brit for the first time at that one Rebel Kettle. So I'm just thinking of that whole area. Like, home. Hmm. What are you sipping, Christina?
I just have Dr. Pepper today.
The health beverages.
You
Nothing too
know what,
crazy.
Christina? I love this because I was like thinking the other day, whenever we get to the level of sponsors, we need to somehow get Dr. Pepper on that list because I am also drinking a Dr. Pepper.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
I've
ma'am.
got the exact same thing as I did last time. Cold Dr. Pepper and ice cold water.
I literally have a sign in my house that says, maybe Dr. Pepper is addicted to me.
Oh, I love that. I have a Dr. Pepper Christmas ornament.
See? Dr. Pepper needs a sponsor.
Yep, just a shout out if you're listening, Dr. Pepper.
If you happen to listen to this Dr. Pepper, the doctor, um, which is funny because I also have the same thing as I had last time, except there's no Coke. I just had a 4 pack of White Russian cocktails and was like, you know what? They're in the fridge. I'm not leaving the house. But these are all fun beverages. But I'm excited about 1639. But maybe not. Randy has been giving a lot of foreshadowing, and it's been really stressful to hear about it. So I went really lighthearted with my segment today. Randy is going to cover our biggest story this week. And at the end, Greg is going to tie together 1639 to 1663 somehow. So stay tuned for that one. But for now, I'm going to cover the post office.
So you're telling me I need to eat my cereal while I'm listening to you before I cry in it when
Yeah,
Randy comes
yeah.
on. Okay.
No, yeah,
Listen,
yeah.
it may be depressing, but we will laugh together at points, okay?
I don't doubt it. I don't. But I know there will be a lot of like anger, tears. There's
Sarcasm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Listen, you get everything here. We're an all-in-one service at the Sip and Saga Society, like the post office. So before the colonies ever united, and ever were even a thing, really. They needed to be able to have a reliable place to send off mail and receive it because if you're going to stay in a place long term, you need to kind of call and get back to the people that you are accountable to and who pay your bills. On November 6th, 1639, the Massachusetts General Court named Fairbanks Tavern the post office for letters coming into and out of the colony to ports overseas. So all the letters that were going to come through here had to come from somewhere outside of the colonies. The colony decided to create the simple post office to prevent, quote, the miscarriage of letters. This was a big deal. And also, this is the only way people can communicate really at this time. There's no phones. The telegram's not even a thing yet. It's a letter or nothing. Or pigeons, I guess. I don't know. Richard Fairbanks was expected to receive letters from the seas or send them off according to the directions on the packaging. For every letter he received, 1 penny, and he was responsible for all the mail that came through his doors. Letters were mostly sent from the colonies to the countries that they had left behind, typically discussing government and business matters, not personal matters. Like you're not like mailing back to be like, so I really miss my grandma. It's been a really long time and I haven't talked to her. Like no one cares about that. You're just doing stuff for business. Like most intercolonial letters were mailed by land or by smaller coastal ships. They chose a tavern because it was similar to European practices and everyone knew where the tavern was. Richard Fairbanks was in charge of the post office, or this specific post office, until his death in 1667. So this was like the first, quote, post office in the United States before even it was the United States. But eventually, Benjamin Franklin would work on the colonial mail system from 1753 to 1774. This system worked by connecting all the 13 colonies into an efficient, like, system that actually talked to each other intercolonially? Is that a word? I don't know. Eventually, they were able to deliver mail from Philadelphia to New York City in only 33 hours. So, innovation, creation, there was no railroad. What else could they do? It was just horses. By the 1770s, the Patriots had connected various underground networks for communication because how else are you going to plan a revolution without letting the British know? This system was called the Committees of Correspondence and then renamed the Constitutional Post. In 1775, the delegates of the Second Continental Congress turned the Constitutional Post into the Post Office of the United States, which was one of the first acts of this new government. An act that they did even before signing the Declaration of Independence, which makes sense because how are we supposed to get together to write the Declaration of Independence without mailing to everybody first? How do you send the save the date? Exactly. It makes sense. Benjamin Franklin was appointed the first Postmaster General of the new post office, and the Post Office Act of 1792 established postal services as a permanent part of the federal government. Today, the United States Postal Service is available to everyone living in the United States and its territories. They employ nearly 70,000 veterans, making it one of the largest employers of veterans in this country. Yay. The Postal Service processes and delivers 44% of the world's mail, which was very impressive to me. That's a lot of mail. These are just fun facts now. 5-digit zip codes were introduced on July 1st, 1963. I felt like that was really late. Didn't realize it took that long to make zip codes. On February 20th of 1792, an act of Congress specified that anyone convicted of, quote, stealing mail shall on conviction suffer death. So if you stole mail, you were going to die. In 1872, the maximum penalty for mail was reduced to a lifetime of hard labor. Today, mail theft carries potential penalties of up to 5 years in prison and significant fines. So if you're
Yeah.
stealing mail, stop, maybe.
They're so serious about it. So, fun fact, I lived in Texas for 2 years and actually worked as a mail carrier for
Mm.
like 3 months at that time, and they taught me how to drive the van and everything.
I did not
Um,
know
Christina.
this.
yeah, yeah, it was wild. And like they actually teach you about like the term like going postal, and they like they like there's so much that goes into like mail sorting and stuff that like I didn't realize like when I got there. Like I was like, oh, they're gonna have everything ready for me. They're like, no, you get your station, whatever neighborhood or whatever you're doing, like you get the mail, but like you have to sort it out by house number, all that stuff. You have to strategically like pack your like packages and stuff like by like what I mean, like in the
Hmm.
truck. Like if I'm putting this in the truck, I'm gonna put the last houses in
In
the
the
truck
back.
first. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And not what, yeah, and it's like crazy. And one story that I actually heard like while we were in like training and everything, speaking, Karina, of like not necessarily stealing mail, but there was one where a guy was just so lazy that he would go through sorting every morning and then he would just go put it in his garage and go like leave it there until his shift is like supposedly over and then go back and like bring back like the empty little thing that like we had our mail in and whatever. And yeah, it was like crazy.
So he just never
Just
mailed
Delivered
didn't
it?
anyone's
deliver it.
mail. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, dude, like you suck. What are you doing?
What?
Yeah.
Why? Just do your job. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it was wild. Like I didn't hold that job for very long because I realized it wasn't for me. But and on one of my like training days where I had to like job shadow, they had a mail truck that had like a little seat in the back and I actually got motion sickness and almost threw up.
Cool.
And the
mhm.
guy that was training me was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I think I need a Sprite." And he went into the gas station and got me a Sprite. And I was like, I don't feel good. But yeah, it was an experience. I learned like obviously not in that depth, Karina, which is cool to learn. But working for them for that short period of time was very interesting.
Yeah,
That
I
is
mean,
wild.
I that is so interesting. I did not know. I don't know. Is it that serious though? Like as a kid, I used to be terrified of even like opening my neighbor's mailbox. Like my aunt.
As a 32-year-old woman, I will not touch anyone. I
No,
do
they
not come
take
at me
it
with your
so
mail.
serious. I think it was last year, or the year before, and like I thought I had done it after the mailman came, and I literally all I put was a little Christmas card. And the guy, like one of the guy, like he came and he literally screamed at me. Like he was like, "Are these from you?" And I was like, "They're for my neighbors." And he was like, "You can't do that unless it has a stamp on it." And like he like screamed at me and he was like, "You need to go get every single card out of the mailboxes." And I was like, "Jesus Christ, dude." Like I was like, "You can grab them and just throw them away if it's that serious." Like,
I
and
honestly
yeah.
don't think it is that serious because I know other people have put stuff in
He
mailboxes. Like,
said like I
Yeah.
could get fined and all this stuff. Like he was dead ass about it. Like,
I mean,
by
sure,
him,
like
is he doing?
technically
Is he the
you
law?
there's probably like some law out there technically, but like you would have to go to a lot of effort to like
yeah.
punish somebody, and you're giving out Christmas cards.
Yeah, I was like, and like he gave me this whole like talk about like it had to have a stamp on it and needed to go through their system. And I was just like, bro, it's my
Why does
neighbors.
it need to
Why
go through
would
the
I? Yeah,
system?
I was like, why would I mail these
Was
out?
this at all during the Trump administration by any chance when this happened? Because he targets the post office, right? Like, isn't he like trying to dismantle them and like get rid of
Oh,
them?
Well, that is
Just
one of the things I
that's
learned is the post office is a self-sufficient entity. Like it is part of the government, but they're supposed to make their own money.
I
They
just
don't
think
get
it's
government
crazy. You
help.
said 44%. That is much larger of a market share than I expected
mhm.
for him trying to get rid of that service.
They
You know
are
what
one
I
of
mean?
the leading companies to mail, like to mail that mails things. Yeah, I don't know if they have a special name for that. Deliverers? I don't know. But the post office is like a big deal. And I got a lot of these facts from their website, so I'm hoping they're being truthful then, not just being like, we're really great, guys.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like I remember and I'm pretty sure the only reason why I got that job because when I went to the interview, I had a cold, but I was like I need a job. So I went anyway, and the postmaster was like, "Are you sick?" And I was like, "I don't think I'm contagious, but I'm coming out of it." And I think she saw determination there. And so I think she hired me because I showed up sick.
They do love people that work, Christina.
Oh yeah, they'll work you to the bone, girl.
Hmm.
If you didn't have mail delivered by like 5 p.m. and you had to get someone to come and help you, like you were in trouble. Like they had like expectations.
Christina.
I was like, and I'm over here like anxious. I'm like, what if I don't deliver all the mail by 5? And yeah, like if someone has to come and like save you, like it was a big deal. It's crazy.
I've never wanted to work in the post office, and now I want to work in the post office less. So, but I have two more fun facts for us before Randy makes us sad. Mad cry. Sarcasm. Okay, so you can mail coconuts, potatoes, bricks, just like as is. You just have to write an address on the coconut and also add a return address on the coconut and or potato and or brick. And then have it weighed for the appropriate postage, pay the postage, and then ship it as is. And that's how you mail a potato, coconut, or brick. There's a company that will mail a potato for you if you don't want to get your hands dirty. I have mailed a potato before, and I would do it again. That is a threat. Anyway, last one is that in the early days of parcel post service, a few parents managed to mail their children to relatives. In 1913, an 8-month-old baby in Ohio was mailed by his parents to his grandmother, who lived a few miles away. No, but we don't have time to deliver Jerry, but the mail will take him. A few miles away, you could have taken him by horse, walking. Anyway, the baby was safely delivered, though, so that's good. Regulations were quickly established to prevent any additional mailing of children through the U.S. mail. I'm sure it is a liability. And now on to Randy. Yay. Oh, also, what did you guys think about the post office?
Yeah, I want to. Greg, did you have something to say? I saw you keep
Yes.
coming off mute.
Sorry.
Oh, you know, you're good. I had a random little like tidbit or factoid when you were talking about like people sending like, important news or political news and stuff. Like part of that's because like paper is so expensive and scarce back then. Like, so that's one of those things I see in the archives is like just little scraps that people will write things on, just to like keep notes and just like I don't know, just the things that people save. But like one of the most common ways for people who weren't like really elite and who could afford to buy imported paper and stuff to keep a diary or a log of like anything if they wanted to do that was actually to write in almanacs because they were like the cheapest and most readily available like source of paper. And so I've looked at a few. I didn't use them in research, but the Massachusetts Historical Society has a few, and I did research up there. And I just pulled one because I knew that people did this, and I wanted to look in one because it was like cataloged with these notes. But what they do is like imagine like you have your book, right? Like any book. And the only way to really write like or to use it as a source of paper is to write in between the lines of printed text, which is wild. So people would cram their like diary notes and stuff in between. So it's really wild. Some of these almanacs are just like packed to the brim with people's notes and stuff.
That's
I
actually
think it's
really
cool.
cool.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting.
And I forget how scarce paper used to be, especially as I look around my library office. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And then they used it as toilet paper once they didn't want to use it for writing into anymore. So that's
Right,
cool
thank you,
too.
Karina. That's all I could think about was that
Randy.
that moment from what is it, Dances with Wolves when the soldier's out taking a
Mm.
shit and is reading the journal and is like, this is shit, and then wipes it on his ass. It's great.
Yeah. I haven't seen that movie in forever.
Oh God.
I mean, that really proves how he felt about that, though. If paper was
Yeah.
that valuable, and he's like, I really don't like this.
Are we ready to be sad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sufficiently not sober for this.
I probably should be more sober for this. Okay. Do 1639. So, part of my role in this group is to expose the past and ongoing erasure and oppression of the indigenous people of this country. I am not an expert or historian, but I do have lived experience and a deeply rooted desire to share the truth. There will be many ways I bring these topics up through massacres. I'm going to be doing an episode on boarding schools, forced migration, removal of rights. But today we are going to discuss an early account of colonial government's direct role in the slaughter of natives. So we're going to start in 1639 with the first sanctioned execution of an indigenous man, mostly because we got to start somewhere in this mess. Oh, also, before we get going, I am Cherokee. Not that I feel I owe it to anyone to explain this, but I say it because we will be discussing three nations. The Pequot, no, the Pequot, the Quinnipiac, and the Paugussett, none of which are Cherokee. Now, why am I saying this? These nations were Algonquian and most likely spoke some dialect of Quiripee. The Cherokee language is based in the Iroquoian language group and does not have much overlap. So I apologize now for any incorrect pronunciation, but I believe that it is better to attempt than to simply refuse to speak their words. Okay. Now, let's get a handle on the conditions of this desperate era and do a quick recap of native-white relations at the beginning of the 1600s. The indigenous people were often used, abused, and cast aside, worse for the wear. While initial relations were cautiously exploratory, for the most part, on the side of the indigenous, continued conflict soured any possibilities of further development. In this time period, some nations were willingly and unwillingly making alliances with neighboring colonists, even against other indigenous nations. At the beginning of the 17th century, many nations still maintained the upper hand, so to speak. They were involved in trading, feeding, and teaching while maintaining their homelands and autonomy in their way of life. At the turn of the 18th century, conditions were becoming difficult for natives as the English, Dutch, and Spanish colonies all endorsed and often funded attacks against native individuals and villages. This century tells the dark history of that shifting of power and position between the indigenous nations and their eventual enemies. As European holds in the New World, air quotes, because you guys can't see me, became more established, the colonizers' focus became expansion. It certainly didn't matter if that land was already occupied. Quite the opposite. Land that was prepared for cultivation, pasture areas already cleared, or established routes were quite appealing to the incoming groups. I can't say that's entirely a surprise, as we have already discussed, the settlers were not well suited for settling. Often known for its rocky shoreline, the upper East Coast was not always a forgiving location to land. Areas around the Connecticut shoreline turned out to be different. The Quinnipiac Nation was settled along the Long Island Sound on an area now called New Haven. You know, that city with the Ivy League Yale. North of them, the Paugussett territory covered some of the wide and fertile coastal plains of the area. To the east of the Quinnipiac lived the Pequot Nation. These coastal areas were a hotbed of resources that allowed the indigenous groups to truly settle. Unlike other nomadic natives, the Algonquian nations were able to establish long-standing residence in the area, an area that these nations and indigenous people in general had lived and cultivated for an estimated 8,000 years. So here are the facts. The salt marsh of the Sound was 3 times the size it is currently and provided a breeding ground for crabs and dozens of species of fish. It provided shelter for waterfowl. At the mouth of the river, 25% of the area's oyster population was housed. Sandy beaches and low tides provided access to obscene quantities of clams. And to top it off, the Housatonic River was the northernmost river run by the Atlantic salmon. I mean, talk about a true haven. Get
It
it?
sounds like a place of abundance, which makes the previous episodes even that much more concerning.
Yeah, I will say the Puritans actually like or those early like explorers who went there would often refer to it like as Canaan in the Bible, like the promised land, like land of milk and honey kind of thing due to the abundance that they had there.
Well, and they ended up coveting and taking, and I'll get to that. So, obviously, with the route to the Americas being the Atlantic Ocean, the primary point of impact would occur on the East Coast. Karina has been covering a few of these colonial foundings, but you may have noticed we haven't talked about the Plymouth colony in Massachusetts or the Connecticut colony. We will remedy some of that today. Our focus, though, will be on exploring this brief period of history for the Pequot, Quinnipiac, and Paugussett nations within modern-day Connecticut and the tragic loss of their sovereignty. So let's get into it. Here is an impression of the 1639 New England natives by a resident of the colonies. To enter into a serious discourse concerning the natural conditions of these Indians might procure admiration from the people of any civilized nations in regard of their civility and good natures. If a tree may be judged by his fruit, and dispositions calculated by exterior actions, then may it be concluded that these Indians are affable, courteous, and well-disposed natures, ready to communicate the best of their wealth to the mutual good of one another. So, pretty wholesome. The Dutch were known for their shipbuilding and conducted trade through the Dutch East India Company. You should remember that name from our discussion in the last episode on the transatlantic slave trade. So 1600 to 1669 was considered their golden age. Just an aside, who gets to decide on these names exactly? Golden ages, I think, usually mean the country is winning by any means necessary, right? Because that's just every time I think of a country's golden period, they're usually stepping on someone. Anyway, Dutch colonists arrived up the Hudson River around 1614 and set up shop 50 miles from the Paugussett territory. That's a choice. Their imperative was lumber, furs, and tradable goods. Early on, the colony managed to force the Paugussett to produce copious numbers of wampum belts made from pearly shells found in the area. Previously used by the nation in religious or diplomatic ceremonies, the Dutch began using them as a foreign currency in their fur trade. So for the next 50 years, the Dutch would be strengthening their hold by building forts along 3 of the major rivers in the area. While incoming settlers were encouraged to buy land from their native neighbors, this was not always done without coercion or manipulation. That's bad, but it gets worse. Who should the nations have actually been worried about? English Puritans, of course. Nothing says Christian religious freedom like forced assimilation and murder. 1629 to 1643 encapsulated the Great Puritan Migration, where 20,000 people emigrated to North America, primarily through Massachusetts' Plymouth colony. However, things would get divisive and crowded as more and more people poured in. In 1632, a colonist ventured westward in search of a more productive farmland. He came up the Connecticut River and found the fertile river valley. By 1635, the Hartford colony was settled by the English. 2 more villages were soon established. These Puritans didn't care much about any of the claims of land ownership, be it the Dutch, the Quinnipiac, or the Pequot. There seems to be little resistance from the Quinnipiac or the Paugussett nations. Not sure that that's entirely surprising, as the arrival of the English in 1633 led to a deadly epidemic for the nations in the Connecticut area. However, the Pequot nation was more interested in conflict and resisted incursion into their lands, truthfully, by anyone. A good thing to remember here is that there are always going to be conflicts between neighbors. The traits of humanity are shared across people groups. Now, this is my long-winded way of saying that not all Native people were docile, and no one should be surprised by that. During this time, the Pequot Nation seems to have fallen into that grouping. There was tremendous buildup to the first legal execution in Connecticut in 1639. Tension in the river valley was becoming more than strained. Some native nations sought to ally with the English to strengthen their fighting capabilities against their enemies. Two such groups were the Mohegans and the Narragansett.
Narragansett. Narragansett.
Narragansett.
Like I know I've read and studied all this area enough that like I do know a couple of them, you know.
Excellent. Okay, so they sided with the English against the Pequot. Confrontations between settlers and the natives continued between 1635 and 1637, the year the English declared all-out war with the Pequots. There are two variations of the inciting incident. According to some, in April of 1637, a group of Pequots attacked a number of settlers along the Connecticut River, killing 6 men and 3 women. They then paraded the clothing of their victims as they passed one of the forts on their way back down to Mystic. The other story is that a trader was accused of cheating the natives, and he and his crew were killed by the Pequot Nation. The nation then provided both explanation and justification of the events to the colony, but were regarded dubiously. Whichever the case, on May 1st of 1637 saw the First General Court of Connecticut meet at Hartford with representatives from the 3 Connecticut colony settlements. It was determined that the death of English colonists at the head of natives could not go without answer. And what better answer than complete annihilation? It served the English purposes well to remove the Pequot Nation from their territory, which must be crossed to reach the coast. It would provide them with well-maintained land to expand into, and an explicit goal, the enslavement of the indigenous people. So that day, they declared war against the Pequot. Now, I would like to point out that the timelines from each side don't really add up. There are varying reports on the length of the war, be it 3 weeks, 3 years, 2 years. There are varying dates to the start of the war because of that as well. You may be listening close and saying to yourself, those dates do not make sense. The main reason is because I am merging the indigenous perspective and the settler perspective. I think it's reasonable to assume the war lasted more than 3 weeks, and there is no record of when the natives began their war tactics. There is a documented siege of a fort by the nation in the summer of 1636. So, that shows at least a year leading into 1637. Additionally, the colony had levied a tax to help fund the war prior to the war being formally declared by the Connecticut colony. So there was enough tension and strain on both sides for that to have been necessary. So the Pequot fought strongly for months and were thought to have been winning most of the incursions. That all ended abruptly when the Massachusetts Bay Colony decided to join in the fight against the Pequot and their allies. After an initial attack of the main village, there was a mass exodus down to the coast. The band was slow moving as they had elderly and children traveling with them as well. They made it as far as the Quinnipiac area of Mystic, where they set up a refuge, short-lived as it was. Both sets of English Puritans, Massachusetts and Connecticut, with Pequot enemy nations, embarked in pursuit of extermination. The Pequots were living in 2 forts, one primarily with men, and one with women, children, and elders. The English group split into two in the night and slaughtered the villagers without any feeling to age or gender. It is estimated that 500 to 800 natives were killed in this massacre. Although their butchery was so total, the Puritans continued to fear the retaliation of the Pequot natives who were left. This drove them to destroy any remaining homes and chance of survival nearby. The location of the Pequot massacre is now a roundabout without any plaque or marking, a reflection of the desire to erase this past. No one wants to be reminded that their home only exists on the bones of the first people. By 1638, the English Puritans were ready to expand again. They had just finalized the Hartford Treaty, which eradicated the name and language of the Pequot Nation, seized their lands, and disbanded any remaining notion of them as a sovereign nation. Just like that, it was as if the Fox people never existed. Any survivors of the war were either absorbed by surrounding nations, as unlikely as it was, often they were betrayed by those nations who were seeking favor or had already allied with the English, or they were sold off into slavery by the English. The Puritans were then emboldened. They quickly navigated down the river to the Sound and up into the heart of Quinnipiac territory. There they established New Haven and began thinking of better, again, air quotes, ways to rid themselves of their indigenous issue. Namely, they began thinking about reservations. I know you're saying to yourself, damn, Randy, we have been on this for so long and you haven't said anything about the execution.
No,
Well,
Randy,
people,
you gave us an execution. You gave us a massacre.
yeah.
My God.
Well, we're finally at the execution part.
Okay. Great.
So, the Connecticut colony had every intention of establishing a variant form of government to the Massachusetts Bay Colony that would end up being more democratic. So they say. The settlers had discussed and outlined, but hadn't formally adopted the fundamental orders until October 25th, 1639. Well, why did they do that? There had been a murder recently, and a child was kidnapped. The colonists, still suspicious of their neighbors, became consumed with their menace and found a native man to lay the blame on. The very next day, on October 26th, 1639, Nepau-Puck, a member of the Quinnipiac tribe, was arrested and tried under the authority of the orders. He wasn't tried for the inciting incidents, but for the murder of an Englishman 2 years prior during the Pequot War. 2 fellow Quinnipiac are said to have testified against him, verifying his murder of an Englishman in the process of that war. At first, Nepau-Puck denied any responsibility, but soon was said to have confessed. Although wartime killing was not usually murder, the English argued that the natives' tactics were quote unquote quote unquote unfair. The English captain who had led the massacre at Mystic had this to say on the subject. The Indians' fight far differs from the Christian practice. Never mind the fact that these tactics were adopted by Europeans and formed the fighting strategy of the Army Rangers. The trial took a total of 2 days, where he was found guilty and then beheaded. His head then graced the streets of New Haven. Because why not? This marked the beginning of a long and tragic acceptance of native executions, often through military tribunals and without any additional oversight needed. All that was left was to finish establishing total dominion by the English. They set aside land in 1639, anticipating the relegation of the Paugussett nation. They were moved within 20 years. The General Court met again to establish set boundaries to barely half of the Golden Hill area that was originally partitioned off for them in 1659. No sooner had 1680 come when the English decided to split the reservation again and leave them with a mere 80 acres. This was several hundred people who were living on those 80 acres. By the 1760s, only 8 of those acres were still under nation control. 1802 saw the last of the land sold off by the official overseer of the nation's legal and financial affairs, who was an Englishman, of course. A new 19-acre tract was purchased in 1841 in Trumbull and is where the nation is centered today. Likewise, the Quinnipiacs were restricted to their reservation with intense oversight from their New Haven English overseers, often not even allowed to sow or reap harvests without prior authorization. Tribal sovereignty, as called by the federal government, is more than a simple authority to govern themselves. It allows nations to preserve their culture, language, and traditional ways of life. It is also a political status recognized by the U.S. Constitution and the Supreme Court with varying levels of coverage. In an ultimate stroke of irony, I had to throw this in, guys. I would like to read you some of the words I received today from the Cherokee Nation Chief Hoskin Jr., who emailed out. The email subject was titled, "Our Sovereignty Tells the Story of Who We Are," and it felt pertinent. Cherokee sovereignty is more than a word. It's a living expression of who we are. It holds our language, our values, and our shared responsibility to protect the future of our people. Across the country and beyond, defending our sovereignty is a never-ending struggle. And it goes on to a link to talk about all the things that are going on with the nation right now in Oklahoma, fighting against the governor and some of the new rulings from the Supreme Court within the last few years. So when I think on these injustices and cruelties, I am sometimes overwhelmed by the pain dealt to the indigenous people of this nation, pain that continues to this day. When erasure and assimilation aren't enough, murder isn't something the government shies away from to ensure utter control. The 17th century saw the brutal massacres of many, many Native nations. 1639 saw the introduction of Native reservations. The Constitution of Connecticut named the fundamental orders, and one of the first government-sanctioned killings of a Native. The following century brought bounty hunting of natives. Specific amounts would be given for native scalps based on age and sex, including children. Biological warfare would be used to purposely infect and decimate the native populations who were encountered. The 19th century saw a fight for native authority and brought to the highest courts. The Supreme Court began ruling on the autonomy of the nations to govern their members, while the federal government passed laws to impede and punish native sovereignty. This is an issue that expands so much farther, but I thought that would be a good place for us to start. How are you guys feeling?
I think as a professional historian who does this area, you covered it really well.
Thank you.
Like, you know,
Oh
um,
my gosh, Greg.
no, for real. I think it's interesting when you mentioned the efforts, you highlighted the efforts the Massachusetts Bay Colony went to try to erase the Pequot, right? By like removing them from maps and stuff like that. But I think that like I don't know. One of the most like important parts, the things that I've learned like studying this history and specifically Indigenous people is that like the story doesn't end there, right? That like
Mhm.
despite all these efforts, the Pequot aren't erased. Like they claim that they did this in the 1630s, but they didn't. And they're, I mean, they're a federally recognized tribe today. And, their numbers have, like population numbers have gone up. They have a really nice museum if you ever get to New England. I reviewed a book that was like a public history museum book that talked about that one specifically, and the Plymouth Patuxent Museum, the living history one, because there's indigenous people who act there in the native village. And the book talked a lot about like this, the toll it takes on people, when visitors come who are culturally insensitive and say stuff to them, like when I visited there this summer, I got to talk with some of the folks who are working there and doing fiber arts and stuff, and they were really cool, like we had a good conversation. And I was telling them about that, and they were like, yeah, like people say some like nasty shit sometimes, even going just visiting a museum today. Like ask
Which
them
is
if they live in
wild.
teepees and stuff, which like makes no
No,
sense
I've
'cause,
been asked that.
no, I mean
I
for real, like that's one of the questions
the
mentioned in the book.
first the first party I ever went to in college, I met this guy from Rhode Island, and he asked me if I still, yeah, it
Oh my
really
gosh.
shaped my opinion of people from Rhode Island, if I'm being honest with you. But he asked if I still lived in a teepee or if I rode a horse to school. I was like, this. It took me, I'm not gonna lie, it took me a full minute to realize that he was even being racist because I couldn't even process that he had asked me those questions.
Brandy, I feel as expected to feel after your segment. I'm
How
angry, I'm sad.
motivated. You were feeling
I am
motivated.
well, and then I am always motivated by anger. I take my anger and I'm like, we're using this.
Hmm.
But part of me like is so inspired by the resiliency of the nations that we have today, and that like all of my TikTok is just like indigenous dancing.
Hmm.
And I love it because it's like, yeah, we are still here. We are still dancing. And part of it does make me very sad because I am Mexican and it's like I don't know where I come from, because like my people were conquered. Like we don't know. Because
Hmm.
half of me is,
Yeah.
and it's like that part makes me very sad. But it's like because of that, I feel like even more need to protect the nations that we know are here for those that are no longer with us and who have been sacrificed for what? For the capitalism. The, what is it? Colonialism. Yep. What do they call
Well,
it?
I can't wait till I get to
Anyway,
cover Manifest Destiny. Be, I mean, me or Greg, I don't care who does it, but like the fact that I have met so many adults who don't know what it is makes me want to shake people. The other thing I will say about tonight's topic and stuff is just how wild it was to be writing this and then just seeing so much of what is happening in American politics right now being talked about. Just, it was painful. It was really painful. Like creating a
yeah,
government so that you can put someone on trial literally the next day. You're like, oh, we needed this. We need this.
we needed this.
We
It's got to
needed
appear
this.
legit, you
Yeah.
know. We can't just go execute someone. If the
And
government
that
does it, then
and
it's
that was
capital
considered
punishment,
that was
you know.
considered more democratic than the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which really even hurts my mind even more because that's how they describe it. Like when I was looking up the orders online, they were like, "This is like it was so much better. It was more egalitarian." I was like, "What the fuck? They made it to kill someone." I
And also, like, who's to say that okay, what kind of methods did they use to get this person to say they did this?
yeah.
Like,
The trial
did
was
Yeah.
they,
only 2 days.
when I was reading the stuff for the
Well, you only need
previous
two
episode,
witnesses in English common law and precedent, like legal precedent. So you mentioned the two witnesses that testified that they saw that. That's considered enough to convict
You're
somebody
joking.
for a crime. Is like there's various criteria because this comes up in like stuff that I read about witch trials. Like you have to have two or more witnesses for something to be, like to
valid.
have what's considered valid
Mm,
testimony. Like if two other people saw it, then like and you trust them, you that's considered legit.
okay.
I
So I don't
just
think I don't think it wasn't surprising to me when you mentioned that they had found these other two
Well,
They
I'm
indigenous.
just
glad I
happen to
put that
find two
in.
people.
I'm glad I put that in. I put that in because I was more like, it was two other men from the Quinnipiac tribe. If I were asked, did my friend who I know went to the war, if he killed someone in the war, I don't know that I would have said no if you know what I'm saying?
That
Like,
may have
Yeah,
just been two dudes they grabbed who were like,
well, yes, or
like,
that they coerced a confession out
yeah,
of
I feel
them.
like there's
Yeah.
probably some coercion behind the scenes there.
Oh,
That
I
wouldn't
definitely
surprise me.
agree. But on the off chance it wasn't, like on the 10% off chance it wasn't, no, that's probably too generous. I still think, I don't know that I would have initially been like, I think, you know, if we just came out, if we just came out of a war and I'm still hot about it, I'd be like, fuck yeah, he killed that Englishman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'd be like, that's my boy.
I hope he kills more of you. Yeah,
You know what? I could see that. Or, but also, how good are their translators or interpreters? Like, how good are they?
they're not good. I
No,
promise.
Exactly. So how
bad,
do we even
bad,
know?
bad.
They could have been like, it
So
sounded like he
bad.
said
That
it was
I
his
want to talk
fault.
about.
Well, and then the other question is maybe they didn't even know what they were answering.
That's what I'm saying. They may not have understood. They may have been like, so was dinner good? And they're like, yeah, definitely. And he's like, said he killed him. I don't know what to tell
Yep.
you.
Oh my God, this should be a TV episode. I can see it now. Oh, anyway, sorry. I'm not trying to make light of it. It's just
Listen, we laugh so we don't cry. That's literally the only way to
I
do
for
it because
real.
if I don't, I will lose it. This is why we do this.
what I watched something the other day. I can't remember what it was, but they were just like, it's okay to have joy in the sadness. I was like, that's so what I needed to hear this year.
Every day, girl. Every day.
Christina, how's your cereal?
It's, I finished it before we started. So all is well.
She's safe.
It was safe. I didn't have to cry in it. No,
Hmm.
it is cool though. Like I like how you guys I don't know. I mean, obviously I know this is the whole point of it, but like picking topics and diving deeper into it of things that aren't taught in school, right? Or not in the depths that, K through 12 school. Let me preface that. But it's cool to even hear about kind of like what you're talking, like the tribes that you were talking about, like, because I've never really like heard, you know what I mean, like about them. And so like diving deeper into that and learning about them and what they did, what they're known for is really cool to learn about. I mean, it is, I mean, obviously it comes the trial and tribulations and the sad parts of it, but it is cool to learn.
The other thing I will say is this episode is gonna make me a little bit conspiracy theory because they need that postal service to run letters from the Connecticut colony up to like is this why they wanted the little men to be running?
Honestly, they might have because I mean, well, the post office that was built in 1639 was only built for interseas travel. So it was only for out of colony post.
As
Right,
like the
that's what I'm
place
saying.
to.
And
So
they have the
yes,
river.
you no, not anything like in the colonies, what you had to outsource. It wasn't gonna go to that post office. It was only stuff that was going to other countries.
Intercontinental.
Yes, intercontinental, not intercolonial or
Oh, okay,
colony.
okay, okay,
Hmm.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so if they needed to go to like to tell people at home about it, they definitely would use that. I don't know what Benjamin Franklin was doing when he connected the postal services, though.
I
That
think
was a
for him
different
it was
war.
wanting to like create like a more consistent like channels of communication. Everything that you shared, Randy, really like it kind of sets up my stuff really well because like I was looking at the dates when Karina sent them out at first and like for me like the most interesting thing like or the story to tell is how 1639 and 1663 are connected by books and printing presses and Bibles, which is really weird in New England. So I feel like that's an interesting like hook for it. So 1639 is when the first printing press is set up in British North America. So that's in Massachusetts Bay. Like there's this guy by the last name of Glover who sends it over and he's going to set up the press and operate. And then like when he's traveling across the ocean, like across the Atlantic, he gets sick and dies on the boat. So that happens sometimes. And so his wife inherits like his property, the press, and also the contract for the guy who was supposed to run the printing press. So, lots of poor English people come over on indenture contracts where they're basically like, I will work for you as a servant, not a slave, for, however many years if you pay my way or set me up or whatever. And so this guy, his name is Stephen Day, is the first person to run a printing press in New England. And most famously, that press publishes the book called the Bay Psalms Book, which was a collection of like hymns that the Puritans could sing and like, it's that kind of stuff in 1640. But like that's just like kind of setting the groundwork for 1639. 1663, I think, is interesting and connected to this because that's when the first Bible is published in British North America. But it is a Bible that is translated into the Algonquian language, or a dialect that's spoken up there, like in Massachusetts Bay, like Massachusetts, Connecticut, like New England, right? And that I think is really interesting because, I think it's just interesting that the first Bible that's ever published is focused on, you know, it's one that indigenous people can read. And obviously that connects to like Puritan missionary desires and the Puritan missionary who's associated with that, who like claims and takes all the credit for translating this is a guy named John Eliot, who's famous for New England missionary history and like trying to convert Native people. He sets up what are called praying towns that are these little communities. They're supposed to try to like make Native people live and farm like English people, and that's like the first step to converting them to Christianity. Like you civilize them first and then convert them to Christianity. So Eliot takes the credit, and obviously it's like, people refer to it as the Eliot Bible and stuff like that. But the actual work of like setting the type and printing it, and even a lot of the translation is done by an indigenous man, part of the Nipmuc tribe, named Wawals, or I'll refer to him more commonly by the name that the English give him, James Printer, because that's like if you look at that's what you'll find if you want to look that up and read more about him. But James Printer is a really interesting person, I think, and like, looking at this and sort of like tying these dates together, tells the story of what Native people did to survive and the sort of like complicated choices that they made in the wake of things like the Pequot War and illness and all the things that, that destiny, English people moving in and trying to take the land, all the different forces that are like set against you as a person. And like, how do you as an individual and how do like you as a community make choices for your survival, right? Like in this world that is like upended and changing really quickly. Um, James Printer, like I said, was a Nipmuc. He was from a community called Hassanamesett. It was a village in near Massachusetts Bay, and they're one of these villages that becomes a praying town. So they agree to follow all these English rules. Like some of the rules are really silly. It's like men shall have shorter hair, and people won't chew lice with their teeth. Like all these things that are like eat like insect vermin and like basically all these things you're gonna wear English style clothing. You're not gonna be naked. There's not gonna be fornication. Like they have all these rules because they're trying to get indigenous people to, you know, follow that and then become civilized in air quotes and then convert to Christianity. So, the people of Hassanamesett made decisions that I think are like, people debate this today, like scholars. Like there's areas of scholarship where people are like, all of this is just like it's simply doing what you do to survive. Like any sort of like efforts to follow Christianity are just like going through the motions to try to stay alive. It's the very like sort of cynical, like shrewd camp. And then on the other side, there's people who will say something like, they couldn't even understand Christianity. It's English culture is so different. They can't understand that they couldn't possibly believe any of this stuff, right? Um, my scholarship and like a lot of other people who like the scholars that I really like their work kind of take more of a middle ground where we're like, okay, like people made complicated decisions and like some of these, some of the messages that are in Christianity could be comforting or something like that in the wake of like everything being challenged, right? Like the Manitou and the spirits that are out there in the world that might give you protection from illness are not protecting you, right? Like people in your village are dying from English illnesses and sicknesses that like you don't understand. And I mean, English people don't fucking understand that either because they don't know germ theory. They don't know what they are. I mean, they think that it's from bad air and all this other stuff, right? Nobody understands anything like in like a modern like scientific sense in a lot of ways. So like Printer's from this community, and so he enters into Harvard sets up a what's called the Harvard Indian School that's designed to sort of train indigenous people who are selected for it to become civilized, right? And also to become missionaries who will go out and help these English people like John Eliot. And so Printer entered the school and then became a printer's devil, which is like where you set the type and actually like, lay out all those keys for that page and press it down and do the printing.
Did you
So
say
it's
printing devil?
they're called a printer's devil. So like the printer is the guy who's going to be like, "Hey, lay it out this way," and the printer's devil is the guy who gets the ink all over his hands and does all the actual nasty work of and the monotonous work of like setting keys and finding the right letters to form like every
Yeah.
single letter on that page in that day, and then press it down to paper and keep track of how to bind it and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know the origin of it, but they call it a printer's devil.
It should have been an Igor. Saying.
So, so Printer ends up, being involved in this work and like translating so in the 1660s, like Eliot is trying to learn Algonquian, but like the local language, but obviously like doesn't understand it as well, very well. And so he relied on people like James Printer. There's another man named Cockenoe, and there's a third one that we think like are probably people he was like closely working with as like missionaries and like involving in these projects to do the actual translating work. So they translated the New Testament in 1661, translated the whole Bible in 1663, printed it. They printed about 1,000 copies. Some of them still survive today. So I've gotten to look at a couple, and they're really cool. Like at the John Carter Brown Library in Rhode Island, they have a copy. There's a few that are still, like they're a very rare artifact because there's just not that many. I mean, they had a second edition, but like a first edition's really hard to find. But that's not where I want to leave James Printer's story because, he's doing all these things and this is like a way, like think about like whatever you want to think about this. This is a way to like better understand the English, possibly like in with your community in a weakened state, have protection against other English people or enemies. Like there's a variety of reasons to want to like to make the decision to embrace the people that are invading you in some way to find a way to survive, right? Um, and so for whatever reason, like that James Printer personally did this, or his community made those decisions, eventually like the Pequot War is kind of superseded by an even worse conflict that you'll often see in the history books as either King Philip's War or Metacom's War, which starts in like it's in the mid 1670s. It's like 1675, 76. I can't remember the exact year. And so people who have made all these different choices, right, to like not ally with the English or to ally with them, like with these praying towns, are really put into this difficult situation when the war breaks out. Because I won't go into all the details, but basically, uh, Metacom is a Wampanoag who has like succeeded to the chiefdom after his father and he kind of unites a variety of different groups to make a major attack against the English and drive them out. And so they launched this war. They damage like I think half the communities that the English have. They burn like 10% of them to the ground. Thousands of people die. It's way more indigenous people uh than English, of course, but they kill thousands of English people, and like people are fleeing to Boston and to the coastline, away from the interior. And Printer was accused of participating in a raid on the town of Lancaster, Massachusetts. And so, like, he avoids getting like prosecuted for that, but eventually he and a number of other Nipmuc people join with Metacom, and it's like we don't really know, like, was he like, hey, this is my chance to like go all in, and if we win, then this is great. Maybe he did that. Maybe he was doing this under duress. We don't know, but we know that he served as a scribe for Metacom and like wrote at least two letters that we think survived. So I mean, he knew English and wrote them in English because he'd been doing all this printing. And one of them is really interesting. This is a letter attributed to him. Like, so he doesn't sign it, but we just assume based on the fact that we know he was with them, and he's probably one of the only people that was like really good at writing in English, and he wrote stuff for Metacom in other situations. This was probably a letter that he wrote or was dictated or something. But the letter is interesting because it stressed that in the war, like the Wampanoag and their allies had nothing to lose but their lives. It's kind of taunting the English after they burn this community down. They're like, we don't have anything to lose but our lives. You guys, the English, have to worry about your property and possessions. Basically he's like, y'all care more about that and trying to protect it. It's also interesting because like they would often, like when they attacked a community, they would slaughter all the livestock because the livestock are symbolic of English settlement. I mean, there's some real, I think, key symbolism there. Um, and so Printer eventually was, uh, I don't remember the exact circumstances of like how he came back to the English side, or um, like if he was captured and then sort of was like, oh, hey, I was a captive. I can't remember the exact specifics, but he also was, during the war, was back in English hands, and he, like many other indigenous people, were confined. Indian Christians or people who've been involved in these missionary projects. A lot of them were suspected for aiding and helping Metacom, right? I mean, so the war really shows that, like, no matter how many efforts they made to fit into English society or adopt some of these things like farming in your way and doing all of these different things, when the gloves thrown down and like war happens, they're still suspected of being um enemies, right? I mean, there's actually like a woman and children who are picking berries at this place called Hurtleberry Hill who are massacred by some Englishmen who are just like, they see a chance to kill some indigenous people and they do that. And so eventually, Indian Christians and people like James Printer are confined in like an ill-equipped, like what can only be described as a concentration camp on one of the islands out in Massachusetts Bay, called Deer Island, which is like sandy. It's like in the middle of winter. It's freezing cold. They're having to literally like just dig for shells on the beach because that's like the only form of sustenance, and people starve to death. And it's like absolutely gruesome conditions. But he and hundreds of people who are put in that position survive that. And so he spent the rest of his life, like Hassan Amisset's resettled after the war, and the Indian Christians who survive like continue to, some of them leave this project, like they abandon it. The praying towns go from like 14 to 2 after the war. And some of that is people just being like, you know what, I'm out. This didn't work, like I'm gonna go live with other indigenous groups or move or resist. Some folks chose to stay, and Printer spent the rest of his life as one of the leaders of that community, pushing like, most of these people, because this becomes like an early reservation and then gets like the story you were talking about like later with reservations and like white managers preventing people from doing stuff. Like one of the worst things that happens in many of these cases is when they start to be supervised by white proprietors, then that's when this land that's supposed to be protected and was promised to you by a treaty starts getting carved up and stuff like that. And so he spent the rest of his life, trying to maintain the sovereignty of the Hassanamessett people. Um, So that kind of gets us, that sort of ties a lot of stuff together from 1639 to 1663. But the last thing I'll say that's cool about the Bibles, like the ones that survive, a lot of them became for the families that did embrace, for whatever reasons, some form of Christianity. These Bibles became important family heirlooms, and so a lot of the ones that survive have some of the earliest examples we have of indigenous writing, which is really cool. So like that involves like signing your name in the book, or in a lot of cases, I mean, like the translation's terrible, right? So everyone pretty much figures out that like the translation's not good. Like, it's like, as you would imagine, like give me 5 years to learn a language and I'm gonna try to write the Bible in that language. It's not gonna be great. It's not gonna be pretty, right? If I like tried to do that in Spanish right now, it would be it would be a terrible Spanish version of the Bible, right? Or French or whatever. Um, but a lot of these writings are really cool because they will engage with the text and like leave message like notes, like they took notes in the book and sometimes left them for whoever was going to read it next, so they would be like an annotation like, listen, this is really important, by a particular passage. And so there's two scholars who've been working like in the 80s and 90s. I don't know if they're still active to try to help revive the Algonquian language. And that's an important resource for trying to do that, right? And recovering a language that was lost. I mean, there's been a lot of like back when we supported public arts and humanities and stuff, efforts to like revive those and have language schools and stuff. Um, and so I've actually read a book by those authors. It's a woman named Kathleen Bragdon, who's an anthropologist, and a linguist named Ives Goddard, who they tried to go and find every example of native writing and translate it. And so it's literally just like sort of a literal transcription where they'll be like, this is the source that we found. Here's what was written, just so that we can kind of catalog all the examples that we have of people who wrote something in Algonquian. So that's how we get the translations of those things. And they've done some scholarship on, you know, how these objects like became a part of a story that like a story of continuing and that continues on, right? By people leaving messages for, the people who are going to come after them and leaving some of those writings.
That is super cool. And I think learning, like, kind of like what you said, like people, I mean, I think it's really cool that they're still trying to, or that they were trying to revive that language and just put something out there for education. I mean, knowledge is power regardless, you know? And so I liked it. You guys are so knowledgeable.
I will say, I one of the things that I do find really cool about the University of Oklahoma is that they accept Cherokee as your language credit
Oh,
for
cool.
college. hmm So like they didn't have enough people sign up when the year that I tried to take it when we were in high school, but my sister took it for 2 years for her language at the community college, and it was accepted as part of her language credit at OU.
Yeah.
I
I
was
I mean,
like,
love
that
that.
that doesn't surprise me though in some ways because like Cherokee I think is probably one of the best preserved ones since they get a
hmm
printing press and
I
start
mean, we have
printing
the
in their own
syllabary,
language
yeah.
so early. Yeah, I mean like so early on that like it standardizes it and like
hmm
preserves it. Because those are cool too. I don't know if y'all have ever looked at any of the like originals or like scans of the Cherokee Phoenix, the newspaper, but it's bilingual. So like on one side it was in English and the other side in Cherokee, which is really cool.
Oh, that
We
is really cool.
when
Yeah.
I was growing up, my grandma Charlotte, my dad's mom, we would stay with her, not very often, but whenever we did, and it was on a weekend, I would remember her taking us to a church that was Cherokee based. I really don't know what we were doing there. Truthfully, I don't. It was kind of like a strange like thing that we would do, but they had the hymnal in both.
Oh,
I
cool.
thought was really cool.
Yeah, there are a lot of, it's interesting. There's a lot of Indian churches that still survive
Native.
too. So like in New England, sorry, native, in New England, well, I'm just used to like in the
No,
literature,
I
like
know when you're talking about it in a historical context, I do not get
yeah, Yeah,
Throws
yeah.
me
Well,
for a
just
loop
because
when you're talking about
in
it
the, like
today.
there's a whole debate about like, because old literature like in the area I study with missionaries stuff, like literally we get in the weeds on this. Like people used to say Christian Indians, but now it's like more like there's a logic to saying Indian Christian in that, like when you're referring to that too, because like we want to put the indigenous identity first and like there's a
Hmm.
reason for it. It's the same way like we were talking about slavery on the last one. And I didn't say this because I was like, I don't want to be like that person
No, I
who like,
did. I hated it if you're going to talk about my part because I thought later, oh my God, I said slaves instead of
well, I
enslaved
always try to say
people.
enslaved
Ugh,
people, like when
it
I'm teaching, and
sucked.
I explain that to my students, like why? Because it's like, like it is emphasizing the humanity first, right? It's not, because like the language, so if the language in using slaves supports the logic of the slaveholder that they're property first, I mean, like there's
Mhm.
very real reasons for that.
Hmm.
But what I was gonna
It is
say
that
though is like,
reminder that they are people,
Yeah,
yeah,
human
absolutely.
yeah.
beings. But
Number
it is hard
one,
when
right?
you're like translating because a lot of the literature is like not as
Oh
nice,
my
I feel
Well, and
gosh.
like.
that is
It's
a
hard.
conversation that is happening in Native communities. Like there are
Hmm.
a lot of people who say Indian, like the older generations, just accept
Yeah.
that. Like I still call it the Indian hospital because that's what it is called. If I were like in Oklahoma and I had to go to the Indian hospital where I was born, that is where I would, you know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
what I would call it because that is what the government called it. But
Yeah.
then there's a lot of people who say Native Americans. I
That,
personally don't like that one because we
yeah.
we were here before they were the Americas,
Yeah.
which is why I just go with Native. But
Yeah.
it's to
The
each their
newest thing in
own.
scholarship is like the like best practice, which I think is cool, is like I feel like, the best practice in scholarship is to like use the actual like indigenous name, like the tribal or community
Yes.
name if you can,
Hmm.
right? So that's why like I
Hmm.
made sure to emphasize that James Printer was Nipmuc, right? I mean, because that's what I would call him, it's like so saying Cherokee or whatever. Um, I feel like is like the probably like the best one, but that's like my opinion just because like people get in the weeds and debating this with like in academic settings, like what's the best word, you know. But even I see that come up I'm on the Indian Country subreddit, which is like a pretty big like hub for indigenous people to get together on Reddit. It's one of the
Hmm.
bigger subreddits, and that question gets asked like probably every month it comes up, where
Yeah. Yeah.
someone's like,
Yeah.
hey, how do we feel about this? And like everyone in the comments is just like, people have strong opinions about like almost any
Hmm.
of them.
I feel
And
like you're
I
gonna
think
make
they're
someone mad
fair.
anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're fair.
Hmm.
You know what? I am a big believer in just asking. What what do you go by?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't need to. I will say I had something funny happen with the boys. Karina, you're on Native Talk, right? TikTok. Have you seen the one where they like do the funny? Do you ever get the native urge to just say, I'm from where the horizon meets the shore. Do you know that? Do
That
you know that?
literally, I saw that last week, Randy.
Did you,
I
Christina?
did,
Okay.
and
Christina's on Native Talk too.
I watched it twice because it made me laugh because
It
like
is so funny. It
he
is
was so
so fucking
serious
funny.
about it. He's like every time
Yes.
someone asks me where
Okay.
I'm from, and
Yeah.
then that's what he started, and he was like,
A
I'm
native
from
urge.
here,
Yeah.
but he was like, but I have this urge to like tell them this whole
So
spiel, and it's so funny.
So the boys made a mistake and thought that I was Haudenosaunee because they have been doing so many projects on them. I've been teaching them a lot about like natives and like communication and stuff like that. Anyway, they go, Randy, I thought you were from up here. I thought you were Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee. And I said, no, I'm from where the Trail of Tears ended. I'm from where my ancestors stopped.
Not
And
funny,
I
but
was like,
also
I said, hold on, why did I answer like that?
your ancestors were like, "We got this, Randy. Don't worry."
I was like, why did I do that?
I wish I could have seen their faces as you were
They were
saying
just
that.
taking it in
Yeah.
there and it was funny. And inside, I was like, Randy, you would be laughing if someone said this to you.
You would be like, okay.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
I
Anyways.
This
love
was a
that.
good
That's probably
episode.
going to be a core memory for them. They're going to tell it one day to somebody. They're going to be like, my nanny is from
Where the Trail of Tears ends.
ended.
Yeah.
Damn, Randy.
Yeah, I literally that's how I started it, and I was like, why? I said, I even went, my people are from. And I was like, we were from the coast. And then I really just, I was like, you need to sit down, Randy.
This was a good episode, everyone. Thank you. I'm so glad we all got to make it and the snow did not deter us because you never know. I don't know. The wind ruins the internet connection, obviously. We don't have snow, but we have aggressive wind in the desert. But I'm so glad also. All of it made me sad, so thank you.
Even your postal service made you sad?
No, my postal service made me happy. That's why I've been learning about Benjamin Franklin and his life, and that guy's weird.
He is a very weird guy.
He's like, the more I learn, the more I'm like, what the fuck,
There are
Benjamin
literal
Franklin?
conspiracy theories about him, like, of course.
I mean, honestly, Randy, yeah, I believe it. He's weird. But I am so glad that we all got to be here today and talk about sad things and the post office. Yay. This is just a few reminders that we're doing book club once a month, the last Thursday of every month. There's a few months where that's a little bit different, and you can find all that information on our website where you can also find our memberships. Yay, you can read with us and learn about how Randy feels about different books, which I'm always excited about because I never know. But thank you so much for joining us on another
Strongly is the
episode.
answer.
Huh, Randy?
Strongly is the answer. I feel strongly.
Typically, yeah, both of us. We all have our feelings, and I want to know every single one of them. And if you have any histories, mysteries, or stories that you think should be told, feel free to message us on Instagram or Facebook at sipandsaga_society or visit our website at sipandsaga.com. Thank you so much for going through every emotion with us and having a good drink along the way. But for now, goodbye. Bye.
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 Adios.
Yay. Goodbye.